Welcome to another episode of What the Truck. It is a wonderful Wednesday here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, here at the studios of FreightWaves. I'm your host, Malcolm Harris. Super excited to see each and every single one of you. Thank you so much for rocking with me for the next 45 minutes. Y'all, it is going to be an awesome show and a show with a lot of knowledge. Looking at On Deck today, y'all, we have some special guests in the building. Kicking it off with one, the only, Kenneth Hanover from Fleetguard is going to be with me. He is their Director of North American Sales as well as Customer Support. Going to be joining the show first. And then the co-founder and CEO of Portcast, Nidhi Gupta, is going to be joining the show. And then, of course, ending it is going to be Ronak Amin. He is with Here Technologies. He's the global product marketing lead for GTM at Here Technologies. 3 guests, 3 awesome conversations, and they all could not be possible without our lovely, lovely sponsors of the month and for the show, PCS. Again, today's show is brought to you by PCS. In this freight market, margins are everything. PCS TMS with Cortex AI helps carriers capture the right loads, cut wasted miles, and find profit points in every run. Because profit, not volume, is the new payload. See how at PCSsoft.com. Now, joining the show, like I just said, and I promised it's going to be an awesome show. Kicking it off is going to be, again, the Director of North American Sales and Customer Support at Fleetguard, Mr. Ken Hanover. Ken, how's it going, sir?
Oh, it's going wonderful. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for being on the show. I hope you're having a great week so far. And I want to jump right in it because, a lot of our listeners want to know, Fleetguard, what is it? What is your role? What's the weirdest part of your workday? Kind of break down Ken at a glance. I want to hear all about it, man.
Yeah, thank you. So name is Ken Hanover. I lead our North America aftermarket sales, and also I have responsibility for the customer support group, which is incredible for me because both those functions are frontline, touching the customer every day with every interaction. Fleetguard is a company that was started by Cummins in the 50s, Cummins engine, now Cummins Inc. And we were created actually to provide filters for the Cummins engines at the time. And so imagine in the 50s, a Cummins engine plant, they set up a couple sewing machines right next to that production line. And there's a couple ladies there sewing bag filters. And those were the first filters put into engines on the lube side. And so that's where our heritage started from. And we've been a Cummins company ever since until just recently. And so we, going through COVID timeframe, we develop our own media, we create our own media, and we manufacture our own media, which is very unique for a filter manufacturer to make their own media and be able to adapt it to environments. And an example of that is during COVID, we adapted our media and partnered with 3M, and they made masks for not only the 3M employees, but for Cummins employees globally. And so out of that, I like to believe, my personal story is that's where we saw a lot of other value for Fleetguard and the Cummins side of the business to go into new industries. And so today we're a standalone company under the name Atmus, a global company. We still have our manufacturing and technology centers globally. We do a little over 1.6 billion a year, but a lot of that is aftermarket, and that's the Fleetguard brand, and that's what I represent today. And I'll say the weirdest part of my day, Malcolm, is I wake up every morning and I'm actually today, this current role I'm in is my dream role. It's the job I always wanted in my 28-year career here at Cummins and now Atmus. And I'm just thankful and I'm surprised every day I get to wake up and interact with customers and have a lot of neat interactions like this event. And I get paid to do it. And so that's kind of a weird moment in my career to be in that environment.
I can actually empathize with you because same. I get to wake up and I get to ask questions for a living, man, and I get to be on a show, and
Yeah.
this is awesome. Thank you for that answer. And I have another question here, and it's a bit of a huge question, so bear with me because there's a strong undercurrent of collective cynicism about the lack of products that do what they say they will and just aren't made with bare effort, the minimum, and when it comes to effort as well as materials. What's Fleetguard's stance on these common issues when it comes to the bare minimum and kind of going above and beyond when it comes to the clients that you service?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really is the heart of that question is say what you're gonna or do what you say you're gonna do. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really critical, and it's hard as a consumer to cut through that. I'm sure because you're looking at all the rhetoric and marketing and everything else going on out there, and it's really tough to determine what is reality and what is just a false proposition. So I think a lot of it stems from our heritage as Cummins. It's in our DNA. And so we were and we still are an engineering-led company with high standards. And so we commit to our customers that all the products we make are going to meet or exceed OE specifications. So we don't compromise either on performance or on the technology in that product. I think it's that unmatched engine protection we offer. We have a very deep understanding of the science behind the technology. And this came from our engine heritage. We would work on platforms, not just with Cummins. We do this with a lot of engine manufacturers globally. We work with them in the development stage of, let's say, a fuel system. And this is 10 to 15 years out before the product actually gets to the consumer. And we understand the nuances of that fuel system, the things they're trying to overcome. And then we develop from that science some technology that will overcome that, and we put that in all of our Fleetguard filters today. And one of the other things we can offer to customers is we do a lot of first fit in OE branded product, but we have much larger Fleetguard aftermarket portfolio, and we don't deviate. So if you're ordering a filter from us, if it's the OE or if it's the Fleetguard version, the only nuance difference is the logo on the outside of the can. So there is really that confidence in it that it's going to meet or exceed those OE specifications. We're going to give them optimize their TCO level, and then the other piece is our warranty. And we're unmatched on a warranty in the aftermarket. We don't prorate our warranty. And so what's that mean to an operator? If you're driving a truck and you're the third owner and it's got 800,000 miles on it, if the filter was the cause of the engine to go down, we don't prorate it. We replace it. We repair it and replace it. Where any other company, they're going to say, well, you got 20% life. It's a 1,000,000-mile motor. You got 800,000 miles out of it. You got 20% life. That's going to be our coverage. And we don't do that. We do full coverage on it, which really means a lot to customers. In the unlikely event, we don't have a lot of warranty claims, but they happen. And when they do, we really do back up our product and our product statement with that warranty.
Definitely. Now, let's switch gears and talk about empowering
Okay.
truckers because the trucking industry is known, right, for working around proprietary constraints when it comes to equipment, especially when those limitations aren't kind of within the best interest, right? How does Fleetguard empower
Yeah.
truckers instead of imposing these predatory limitations when it comes to trucking and just overall being in the space?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm personally a big advocate of right to repair. It's obviously big in the transportation space, and also I do a lot in the off-highway space. It's a very large topic there. I would say there's a couple aspects to it. So the understanding from the history, I understand the rationale of why. So why an OEM would do that. So if we're going to make a filter for an OEM, they will put those restrictions on us. Usually they want IP protection on their products. And really it's to ensure, number one, they're not going to have high warranty costs while that equipment's under warranty. Because let's be honest, it goes back to your previous question, do what you say you're going to do. There's a lot of that out there where people are saying, hey, my filter meets the specifications. You put it on a new engine and it's going to cause that engine to go down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that's part of the protection. The other piece is they want their customers to have that brand experience. And so whether you're the first owner of that truck or their third owner, it's still that truck owner has that perception. The driver has that perception. Man, this truck is horrible. The fuel filter keeps plugging up on me. And traditionally it's not the engine or the badge manufacturer of that truck brand's fault. It's probably that filter is not doing the right thing or they got a bad load of fuel. So that's part of it. So from a Fleetguard side, we do a lot to help our customers work around those issues. Filters are a consumable item, and most truckers, when they have to do a service, they're going to touch a filter. And so I like to look at it as you don't want to go to multiple storefronts to get your filter. So you got to go air filter here, and they got to stop at another truck stop over here at Love's to get your fuel and lube. Over here, get a Fleetguard lube filter there. It's really about one-stop shopping. So we approach it from two ways. We have a full technical team. So our company's kind of set up where we have an engineering and technical team that's strictly focused on aftermarket. So as those filters come out on that new equipment, if we're not on it, if we're not the original provider, we're already working well in advance to figure out what are the qualifications of that filter, what are the technical specifications of that filter, and then are we able to produce it ourselves? And so our company also has a high level of integrity, and we're not going to go around someone's IP protection. So if they have IP protection in place, we're not going to violate that. So that's one thing we do. And we'll continue to work on how do we work that filter into our portfolio of products and offer it to the customer. The other thing we do really quickly is we go to the original manufacturer of that filter and we buy it from them. And we brand it Fleetguard and we give it to our customers because we want them to have all the products that they need to service that truck when they go in to service it. Because there's nothing more frustrating. You go in and you're pulling in, let's say you're a truck driver and you're going down the road and you're going to pull into a truck stop and get a service. And all of a sudden they're like, oh no, we don't have the filter. We can't get it in the brand we have. You're going to have to sit here and we got to go drive down the street and get it from the OE manufacturer. So we don't want that experience for our customers. And so we go out and purchase the product. The OEs know we do this and we provide to our customers until we have a workaround with it made in-house product.
That's awesome. Now, Ken, let's have some fun before I get you out of here. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being a toy squeaker, 10 being a foghorn, how loud should an 18-wheeler's horn be? What do you think, man?
Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 things here. I think I'd add a third piece to this. So the first piece is, the saying, you can't fix stupid. So I understand the plight of the truck driver driving down the road. So I think they do need, I'll call it a stress ball, but it could be that little squeaker that's in the cab. They need something to relieve a little of that stupidity that's out on the roadways today. I would like to also give them a foghorn. And I'm going to be U.S. centric, but I understand the plight in Canada and Mexico because I travel there a lot too. We need a foghorn in Washington, D.C. The industry does a pretty good job advocating for our truckers, improving their roadway conditions, finding safe places for them to pull off the road and get their rest time. But I think we need more of that. And so I do think we need a foghorn in Washington, D.C. that just reminds our politicians, hey, you're missing out. We need support here. And then the final piece, I'll say we're going into wintertime. So I'll give them, and I'll say it's a snowplow. They get a snowplow in the front and they get 1 mulligan a day. So they get to move someone out of the way in a safe manner. We're not going to hurt anyone, but in a safe manner, they get 1 mulligan a day to push the car out of the way. And I'll leave it at that.
I love it. Ken Hanover, the Director of North American Sales and Customer Support at Fleetguard. Ken, thank you so much. This was such an awesome and insightful interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was awesome. And guys, we're going to roll straight into our next interview because joining me is the co-founder and CEO of Portcast, Nidhi Gupta. Nidhi, can you hear me okay? How's everything going?
Yes, I can. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. I know it's been a long time coming, and I'm excited for our listeners to get to key in on what you have going at Portcast. And I want to jump in and just set the scene real quick for everybody because visibility is everywhere. Every single TMS, every platform, it says, obviously, we got real-time data. We can do this, we can do that. Now, walk to me because a lot of teams are still firefighting, still explaining, missing, SLAs. Why is this? What's missing from the traditional visibility platform that Portcast is currently solving today?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. At Portcast, we actually look at visibility from both an operational perspective and also how it impacts the financial budget and the freight spend. And you're right, visibility has become the default expectation. Everyone claims to have dashboards, maps, pings, but still, if you look at every operations desk, it still looks the same. People are firefighting, calling carriers, rewriting arrival estimates in multiple spreadsheets. So the issue is that most legacy tools have a ton of data, but they let the human operator interpret the data. And the data is still not connected enough, it's not timely enough, and it's definitely not automatically interpreted to drive action. At the same time, I think we need to understand that visibility doesn't mean that shipments are never going to be late. Visibility means that we should be focusing on the right fires as early as possible. before the customer informs us of the fire or before it's too late to do anything. And that's where we at Podcast believe that operators shouldn't spend their days narrating problems or looking at data sets, but actually the data should be talking to them. They should know where there is an issue, why there is an issue, and what possible actions you can take so that they can actually spend their time preventing it. So I think that's where we're thinking about it a bit differently.
Very, very well said. Now, let me ask, because I love real world and applicable situations. So, can you give an example where a customer used Portcast to prevent a costly disruption before it happened? Because I know a lot of different teams use obviously your product and try to get ahead of the game, specifically in logistics. So, walk me through what type of example can you share for myself as well as our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a customer which has perishable goods that they are transporting from, from Asia to around the world, basically, and their payment terms are linked to the arrival date of the cargo. So the consignee only pays or should get an invoice as soon as the arrival date has happened. But inaccurate ETAs meant that they were either issuing invoices too early or at times much after the actual arrival. And this created the consignee's frustration if the invoice is sent too early, or it impacted cash flows and added financial risk if the invoices are sent too late. So besides all of the operational challenges and manual workload in terms of looking at what's happening to the shipment, actual bottom line impact is being created if the ETAs and the data is being accurately provided. And that's what we did with Podcast. We provided accurate ETAs and also the reasons why issues are happening and integrated that into the customer systems, feeding directly into both the operational and the financial workflows. And this aligned with the payment processes on the actual shipment progress. And what that means is that the customer frustrations around invoicing, basically to use their term, just went away. What used to take up to, I think, 2 full meetings per week is now resolved in about 5 to 10 minutes, which means that their leaders are now freer to focus on growth. And there's also strengthened confidence with their banks, with their consignees, and also internal teams. So that's a real example of how visibility impacts the bottom line and actual spend or even revenue leakage here.
Fantastic. Now, Nidhi, you talked about turning visibility into prediction, helping companies not just see delays, but anticipate them. And I love this saying. What does that process look like in practice? What does that look like?
Yeah, so prediction is not just a dashboard feature. Prediction, in my mind, is really a shift from waiting to responding. And again, let me explain with an example. In one of our recent discussions with customers, they shared that they shipped a container from Jakarta to Vancouver. So the vessel crossed the Pacific and visited Tacoma, which is supposed to be one port before Vancouver. But then the vessel, for some reason, decided to skip Vancouver, and it went back across the Pacific to Asia and called the next port call was at Busan in Korea. Now this shipment is going along this whole direction, and the carrier kind of scrambled to add Busan as a transshipment port, offloaded this container, and then try to find another vessel from Busan to Vancouver. And as you can imagine, the transit time was double of what it should have been, and the shipment sat at Busan port for almost 11 days before the next ship was assigned. And in such a case, where does predictive visibility help? Where can Podcast help? The customer could have known the risk of the vessel skipping Vancouver before that happened, as we're checking every single vessel schedule and any changes if the ports are being skipped or added. And we could have suggested that you can unload at Tacoma and truck it to Vancouver. And even if that was not done, that sort of was missed. We could have then suggested that now there's a new transshipment port at Busan that has been added. And instead of waiting for 11 days for the carrier to find the next vessel, we could have suggested that here's an earlier vessel for the same carrier that's going from Busan to Vancouver, and you can ask the carrier to get on it, because anyway, the carrier has delayed the whole process so long. So that's where predictions really become more practical and how it becomes meaningful.
Let's talk about identifying the kind of disruptions in the space that can be forecasted. I mean, port congestion, weather, geographical issues, demand swings. What does this encompass? Kind of everything that can be forecasted, or is there more as well that I'm necessarily not touching on?
Yeah, so we think about, risk as no longer occasional. Risk is really structural, and there are risks in three areas that we think about. I think the first is any changes that the carrier makes. These are operational changes. So if the carrier skips a port, there's a blank sailing, there's a rollover. So that's an operational risk. The second is completely external, beyond the control of the carrier as well. So cyclones, geopolitical conflicts, strikes, or congestion at a port. And the third is financial risk. So overpayments on the invoices, duplicate charges being carried, and losing freight spend because of that. So traditional tracking tells you something has happened, but predictive visibility and really creating value means why is it happening, what it means for you, both operationally and financially, and how can you make sure that you save costs in real time, but also you don't overpay where it's not due.
How do you make sure that predictive data doesn't just sit in a dashboard, but actually drives real operational action? How can you ensure that when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think again, it needs to be really explainable. It needs to be linked to actions, and it needs to have context. So again, let me, since we talked about risks, and the best thing is to do is to give some examples. So let's say in the recent months we've seen adverse climate situations. For example, the typhoon Ragasa in the South China Sea. So what we did was we alerted our customers of the shipments that are delayed because of that through the technology. Also, they get alerts on which trade lanes are likely to be impacted, not just now, but for the next few days, and the carrier schedules, which will likely miss the transit time plans. And what they can do with this is notify their end customers or their factories, replan for the next shipments that are destined or originating in that area, and basically plan this dynamically. Another example is there was severe port congestion around earlier this year, I think March, April, in the African ports like Cape Town, and vessels were waiting almost 6 days or 10 days at the anchorage before getting a berthing slot. And this was due to adverse weather conditions and heavy winds, but already the ports were constrained because of the diversion of vessels from the Suez Canal because of the geopolitical crisis there. Again, in such cases, not just depending on what the carrier data looks like, and not just kind of relying on static information, but really predictive information with early warnings about delays, congestion, monitoring blank sailing in an automated manner, and then making it actionable so that you can get alternative routes, you can get recommendations of what you do with your downstream supply chain, when do you notify your customers, and what should you notify. That's where it creates more meaning.
Nidhi, a lot of logistics software sounds great in theory, but there's always somebody, and you know this being a founder as well as an executive. There's always somebody saying, "What is the return on this investment? How am I able to see what this is going to look like in terms of a return?" So, how does Portcast make visibility measurable, but also something finance leaders can look at and actually quantify?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think predictive visibility or any product, any technology needs to be measurable, and data really needs to move a financial number. So our customers look at three metrics. The first is, of course, productivity. So spending fewer hours on tracking, checking documents, reading the documents, entering data into a spreadsheet or into an ERP system. So that's where we basically enable almost 80% touchless operations through the technology. The second KPI that companies track or look at is operational expenses, how they can save the OPEX. And that, from an operational visibility perspective, comes from reduction in detention demurrage, saving on last minute truck replanning, lower buffer inventory, and real use cases like that. And from a financial visibility perspective or freight audit, it is about saving on any invalid surcharges, incorrect accessorials, basically not paying what you should not be paying. And that can be almost 4 to 6% saving on the spend on average.
Awesome. Now, Nidhi, on our prep car, I was really, really fascinated and still am about this topic specifically. Let's talk risk because it's not just about tracking shipments. Obviously, it's about managing risk. What are the most common risks you see in international transportation right now? And how is predictive visibility helping shippers and forwarders mitigate them before they escalate? Because this is it's a topic I absolutely just I love to talk about because I'm just genuinely fascinated by it.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, earlier, we see risk across three categories: the operational risks, things that the carrier is making changes on, and that's what most products really focus on. But there's also external risks, anything that happens in the world at this point in time, geopolitical, weather or climate adversities, or any port. Sort of congestion or strikes, all of that is impacting our supply chains, and all of that is creating more firefighting and last minute replanning decisions. And then there's the third category of financial risks, because there are audit teams, there are finance teams who are looking at documents, invoices, bills of lading manually and checking them against contract terms, against the free days that were actually exceeded or not. And really, there are manual errors that are bound to happen. That's those are sort of the various cases of risk that we see, and again, through technology, through data and AI being contextualized for the industry, we can really create value. So another example I can think of recently is where a customer used a certain carrier between Hamburg and Durban. And so this is Europe to Africa, and the carrier that they chose was going from Europe to Asia, that's Malaysia, to Africa, and that took them almost 70 days. But there are services which go directly from Europe to Africa, so from Hamburg to Durban through ports across Africa, and that would take about 30 to 40 days. So that's like really a long transit time and inefficient, also in terms of carbon emissions. So through understanding what operational issues are there, but also there might be external challenges on why that vessel is not going directly to Africa, it might have to go through Asia. We're able to then use technology to say, please switch the carrier, like here are alternate options. And that's exactly the intelligence that the customer needed. And then they decided to switch the carrier and the service that they use for the trade. So that's where, capturing the risk, but again, making that meaningful for the exact supply chain that a customer is using and suggesting alternatives is useful.
Now, you described the future of supply chain in the one word, touchless. I think that's so cool. And this is where data talks directly to systems and people intervene only when needed. It sounds futuristic, but how close are we to that type of reality?
I would actually argue touchless supply chains aren't futuristic, they're inevitable. Today, AI is already helping us in various ways. For example, large language models are digitizing shipping documents with very high accuracy. This is much different from traditional OCR or similar technology. So any bill of lading, invoice, purchase order, etc., regardless of the language format, can be digitized highly accurately. So that's one way. Another way AI is able to help us already is read through millions of web pages, identify risks that might impact supply chains, classify these risks, which are actually severe and actually impacting supply chains, and help us kind of know which risk might impact a particular shipment or not. And AI is enabling fully touchless auditing of documents, which is still done by freight analysts or outsourced to shared service centers. So we're now moving from monitoring shipments to avoiding any exceeds on freight budgets or blowing over SLAs. Also, what we are seeing is there are companies, leaders who are now starting to measure how much percentage of their supply chain is actually touchless today, what they want to get to in the next 1 year and 2 years. So they're setting goals, targets for that, how much of their operations will not be done in a repetitive, manual way. So touchless is not an overpromise, but it's fast becoming a reality.
Fantastic stuff. Now, before we wrap, Nidhi, I want to talk because I want to go back to your story. I mean, you've built Portcast into a leader in predictive logistics tech. What does inspire you to create the company, and what gap did you see that others simply just didn't have the bandwidth to do?
So I work for a large logistics company across Asia, and a lot of the customers, the shippers that I worked with, they all wanted to improve their supply chain. They wanted to make it more efficient, and the starting point was to create a control tower. The starting point was to connect all of the data that they have in their systems and external data, and put that on a control tower so that they can really visualize where the inefficiencies are before they can even start to solve those inefficiencies and make their supply chain better. But still, to get that set up, to get that control tower set up, it required a lot of manual intervention and data teams to basically enter a lot of data, look at documents, enter all of that manually. And that's where, I recognize the need for data to be consolidated, harmonized, let it speak the same language, but also how cloud computing and AI will help solve these real problems. And there's a lot of inefficiency which I see as opportunity in the supply chain that we can leverage technology for. So that's where Podcast was built, and our mission has been to make logistics efficient and touchless, and eventually self-adjusting. And I believe it starts with data. The right data then enables the right insights and then decision making. And we want to play a role in creating intelligence that can orchestrate supply chains.
Nidhi Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Portcast. Nidhi, where can people go to find more information about you, your journey, as well as the company Portcast?
People can definitely visit our website. They can reach us on LinkedIn as well. We'd be most happy to talk with leaders and thinkers who are trying to make logistics more efficient.
That is awesome. Nidhi, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a great interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome, guys. And I told you we had three guests, and the final one, I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy, as well as the other two that have been outstanding. Coming up with me, representing Here Technologies, Ronak Amin. Ronak, can you hear me okay, sir?
I can hear you great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Again, your background, the global product marketing lead for GCM at Here Technologies, and super excited to just get into your story. How did you get into this? And just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm leading product marketing for our fleet, mobility, and transport segments at Here. Prior to Here, I spent some time at a couple of commercial vehicle OEMs. My background is actually in automotive technology. So starting first in powertrain systems, engines and transmissions, later moving into things like fleet telematics, autonomy, electrification. So coming into Here, I was already a bit primed to find new use cases and GTM strategies for location tech in our space. For me, fleet operations are getting more complicated, costs are rising, labor remains challenged. So this is as good of a time as there's ever been to approach fleets with new exciting innovations for location tech that help drive out efficiencies, both in the middle mile and the last mile.
So, from your perspective, specifically right now, what is the biggest opportunity for Here's Technology in commercial fleet, as well as the trucking space, to kind of make that mark?
Yeah, we serve really the supply chain on an end-to-end basis. So
Right.
thinking about innovations and advancements and things like real-time tracking, uh, predictive ETAs backed by AI/ML, complex routing APIs that help fleets optimize their businesses. So those are the areas that we're focused on, amongst many other things.
I always like to educate our audience on what the truck, and I want you to walk us through the bridge strike issue, all right, and the totality
Mhm.
of it. I know you've done a lot, had quite a bit of work involved in it. Kind of walk us through this as an audience and provide some insight if you don't mind.
Yeah. So it is a shockingly common and costly issue
Yeah.
that is bridge strikes. There's about 220,000 bridges in the United States. There's about 7,000 tunnels, and there's about 14,000 odd bridge strikes that happen every year. And some of these bridges are getting hit dozens of times or even hundreds of times. Incidents range from small to large, but can quickly escalate to millions of dollars. When you consider things like infrastructure damage, vehicle damage, insurance costs, medical cost, and so on. So just as an example of that, there was a bridge strike to an underpass in Washington State a few weeks ago. It was so severe that they had to take the whole thing down. It was closed down, 17,000 daily drivers depend on that interstate, cost $8 million. The governor of the state came out and said, ultimately, the fleet will be held responsible for that. And when you look at the different states around the country, states are spending money to either repair bridges or prevent bridge strikes. Seeing things like $4 million spent in Virginia, $7 million in Texas, $19 million spent in New York to avoid bridge strikes. So yeah, it's a major, major problem. Looking at then what causes this, why do bridges get hit? Why do some bridges get hit numerous times? There's three aspects to that. There's the human element. There are drivers that may not have seen the posted sign, may not have known the height, weight, dimensions of the vehicle, the cargo that they were hauling. There's just that aspect of it, right? Then there's the infrastructure aspect where signs are just not there, or they're not clearly visible from the road, or they're weather beaten and the driver can't see them any longer. Those gaps definitely exist. And then the last one is just the technology gap. So nothing in the vehicle alerting the driver to a low bridge. And the big one that we see, and I would think probably the most avoidable, is drivers using passenger vehicle routing solutions versus using a routing solution that is tailored for commercial vehicles, that has that level of information about things like low bridges, amongst many other things for commercial vehicles.
Your recent blog, The End of Bridge Strikes, there's a map for that, highlights the role of precise map data. How does Here's mapping differ from standard navigation apps? I mean, it seems like there's so many of these within the space. What makes Here's specifically different?
Yeah. So we have about 330 truck height restrictions in our database.
Yep.
And we expose that to fleets either through partners or with our own driver app. Also in the database are a lot of other things that drivers need to know. Truck-specific speed limits, certain rules and regulations of the road, things like that. So a lot of fleets are using our routing API in their transport management backend. When you combine that with the driver-facing app that we have on the front end, then you have complete consistency, across that process.
Now, is Here specifically leveraging AI or machine learning to identify and warn about high risk areas like low clearances, or is there something else specifically that's embedded within that as well?
Yeah. So as a digital mapping company, a location tech company, essentially everything we do is sort of underpinned by AI and has been for a while. Regarding the driver or the application level, we have the ability to leverage edge devices to identify signage that maybe the driver otherwise wouldn't have. We have a lot of real-time data coming into our database. We have a historical data stream, so we can turn those things into proactive actions. For example, we have a product called Road Alerts that sends drivers real-time hazard warnings. And then looking at conversational AIs and agentic AI, or the use of agentic AI, and we anticipate that truck drivers will soon be able to make complex queries directly to the vehicle, maybe if they're uncertain about an upcoming route. As well, if you think about a vehicle that gets an updated route plan on the back end, an AI agent can help coordinate that in compliance with the vehicle's height, weight, cargo, and staying aligned with what the driver has inside the truck.
Ronak, I always ask this question, feedback that you're getting from fleets that adopt this technology and things that you obviously hear within your role. What does that look like specifically? I'm assuming it's good based off the information we've heard in today's interview.
Yeah, we have fleets that tell us routinely that they have avoided bird strikes, using our technology.
Yeah.
Of course, that's difficult to quantify on a daily basis, like something like a fuel savings would. But one incident can easily, amount to millions of dollars in damages, lost time, disruptions to fleet operations, and things like that. Another thing fleets tell us is that, sometimes they want to write their own rules. So, for instance, if they know that a route is particularly problematic, they have experience with this, we can allow them to engage, with the system to actually write those rules and do some of that customization for themselves. Yeah, and then when you look at the fleets that haven't hit a bridge, wondering why we should, think about something like this, it only takes once, right? So if it hasn't happened yet, certainly it could.
Definitely. And I was going to jump into that briefly and just talk about the adoption because, like, if they haven't obviously had a bridge strike, what's the case for adopting this tech early? Yes, you want to avoid it, but is there any other things that go in line with this that you would definitely recommend and highlight right now?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about bridge strikes, right? Because we know that the damages that can incur, but there are a lot of other compliance reasons to have something that's tailor-made or dedicated for commercial vehicles. And those use cases are pretty broad, right? From making sure that the vehicle can actually make a maneuver or a turn, that's something that can be mapped and provided to a driver so they're not at an intersection where they have to make a really awkward turn. They're going over a curb. There's pedestrians involved. So there's a lot of smaller reasons, right? Aside from just the big, bridge strikes or something that's going to potentially cost millions of dollars.
Ronak, as fleets electrify, how is here integrating bridge strike precautions and preventions into EV routing challenges? I know this is a pretty interesting one, so I'm curious to see what your answer will be.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that the prevention measures are no different between, ICE vehicles and EVs. However, and to your point, the big consideration is that electric trucks are just more expensive.
Yeah.
They could be more consequential. There are high voltage electrical components on board, batteries. You think about the implications of that, and then you think about bridge strikes. And so, I think in a very different lens. So I think it is very important that we try to keep electric trucks, as safe as possible for the roadways. I think that there will be a big technology revolution around, especially when we move into more electric trucks that have different software architectures on board and higher levels of capability. I think you'll start to see some onboard technology start to improve as well.
What future here features are you most excited about for improving safety and routing intelligence?
Yeah, I think that going back to the AI topic, I think that agentic AI will play a meaningful role in both the operational and safety aspects of truck routing. And there are just so many possibilities there. We talk about the transport management side of it, the dispatching through to the last mile and even the last meter delivery for our last mile customers out there. So I think that there is just too many opportunities at the moment. And we're going to be actually at CES at the beginning of the year next year, talking a little bit about that and learning a little bit about that as well.
Ronak, your role is really, really fascinating for a lot of our listeners, right? They are obsessed with the space, but also tend to be everywhere, whether it's a 30-year veteran, whether it's, someone fresh out of college. What leadership lesson has stood out the most in your role that you could share with somebody listening today?
Yeah. For me, it's really trying to sift through, I guess you would call it some of the noise. Like
Yeah.
in our space, we serve the automotive industry, we serve fleets, the technology industry, and there's a lot of themes, there's a lot of new things that evolve every year, and sifting through some of that and really trying to solve customer business challenges and really almost like putting yourselves in their business, really understanding it and solving those meaningful, tangible problems is something I focus on and try to, get my colleagues to rally around that as well. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say about that. And going back to bridge strikes, for example, that should theoretically be a pretty trivial issue, right? In 2025,
Yeah.
you think about bridges that are getting continuously hit, and the problem persists, and you look for a really tangible solution to try and solve that.
Ronak Amin, again, with Here Technologies. Ronak, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. This was such an insightful and awesome conversation. Can't wait to have you back as things continue to unfold for your team in 2026 and beyond, man.
Likewise, thanks.
Hey, thanks so much. Again, Ronak Amin, he is representing Here Technologies. And coming up here, you guys see what I did there on Friday. The road ahead, joining me are going to be three awesome guests, kicking off Carlos Barbosa with EPOS Global, as well as Zach Seller with Ploger Transportations, and Ben Marks Optimal Dynamics. He is their senior solutions leader. Guys, such an awesome show ahead on Friday. I'm your host, Malcolm Harris. It's been another episode of What the Truck. Like, subscribe, follow on all platforms. I'll see you on Friday. Peace.